Good morning. I'm Nitasha Buldeo and welcome to Wellbeing Wednesday. Now, today we're discussing ego and non-egoic or egoless. We're trying to understand what these terms mean and how you can use your understanding of them to improve your quality of life. Now, the term ego is confusing, especially because it's linked to several psychological constructs. And it has also given rise to various linked words, such as egoism, egocentrism, egotism. But what does ego actually mean? Simply put, ego is the Latin word that means I. It entered psychology with Sigmund Freud. And in Freud's theory, ego is part of the human personality that mediates between animal desires, called id, and social standards, called the superego. Now, Freud never used the word ego in his writings. Ego was the translation of Freud's words, das Ich, which is German for the I. Now, when Freud talked about the I, he was referring to that conscious decision-making part of you that you regard as I. When you say things like, I like chocolate, or I have a good relationship with my mother, or last night I dreamt of coffee. This I is your ego. So ego involves the processes or reactions in which I, me, or mine feature. So ego is about I, me, or mine. Now let's consider the term egoism. This refers to the motive to act in one's self-interest. So the motive to act in your own self-interest. Being an egoist or behaving egoistically means that you are pursuing your own goals. It means that your motive is focused on you, the self, the I. Now, egocentrism refers to how we perceive the world. So how this inner I perceives the world. And we perceive the world from our own perspective. All humans tend to be egocentric because our sensory organs and mental constructs are what give rise to our world. Our perception is limited by our own illusion of space and time, as well as our past experiences, our goals, our beliefs, our sensory perception. That all comes into creating how we perceive the world. So, if we're wearing headphones that cancel out the noise, we perceive the world in one way. If we're cover up our eyes, we perceive the world in a different way. But how we perceive the world is always based on our own experience. Hence, that's what egocentrism means. We're always looking at the world from our own inner focus. Now, humans differ to the degree in which we can actually step out of our own perception. And some are more able to view things from different viewpoints outside their own perception than others. Yoga and some meditation and ritual practices train you to step out of your ego perspective. Now, stepping out of our own inner perspective or ego perspective helps prevent us from becoming egotistical or becoming an egotist. And we'll discuss the practices in more detail a little later. Egotist or egotism refers to evaluating oneself more favorably than warranted. Thousands of research studies show that humans are biased to view themselves too positively. We are all biased to view ourselves more positively than others. Now this way of viewing ourselves can actually be both healthy and unhealthy. Viewing yourself positively can lead to self-esteem and a healthy identity. But viewing yourself too positively as opposed to others can lead to narcissism. Now, just to summarize, the broadest ego-based term is egoic. Egoic means pertaining to the ego or referring to yourself. Therefore, egoic thoughts, motives, emotions, behaviors, and reactions are all centered on the I. They're centered on I, me, or mine. So being egoic means the focus is on the self, on I, me, or mine. And much of the time, human thoughts, our thoughts and motives and behaviors focus solely on ourselves, on the I or the ego. This means that you are thinking about what you want, what you are doing, who you are, what others think of you, and how the situation or the event benefits you. In these situations, you are being egoic. You are highly self-absorbed, and all your reactions are about you. However, there are times when your thoughts don't involve your ego. There are times when the I, that inner I, gets lost. And this happens when you're engrossed in a good book or a piece of music, or when you're involved in a really engaging task that's challenging but interesting at the same time. Or sometimes when you're having a really stimulating conversation that's opening up new ideas, we tend to lose our egos. But the ego is definitely lost when you are having a peak experience, you're in a flow state or a meditative state. At these times, the I recedes into the background. And what happens is you start to respond automatically. There isn't much conscious self-related thought. What this means is that you're not concerned with who you are. You're not concerned with what you want. This is not about your self-interest. Your thoughts are not dominated by I, me, or mine. And what research shows that it is in these moments when we lose that sense of I that we are most creative. And we are creative because we are not limited by our own constructs of who we are. This hypoegoic or non-egoic or egoless state is what many meditative and spiritual practices allude to. Now, samadhi, turiya, enlightenment, all stem from this non-egoic state. Because in this state, you are free to experience the whole. So now to elaborate on that concept a little more about how the non-egoic state maps with the various states of enlightenment or spiritual progress, we have Jivasu join us. Jivasu was our guest on the webinar on enlightenment. And he's going to be joining us today to explain his understanding of ego and how to transcend the ego. So we have Jivasu join us.
Ego is a mechanism for me to connect to the world, to live in the world, to have relationship, to form teachings, all those things which Buddha did or all these sages did. Because if ego is not there, everything becomes silent, right? But what happens in most of the people, we achieve ego and then we get very attached to it. So our world will remain limited to ego. So although ego is a fact, but it is only a partial truth. In the scheme of enlightenment, it is just one step, absolutely vital. But suppose if I'm going for a pilgrimage to Kedarnath, some remote shrine, and then comes Dev-Prayag, looks so wonderful, and I feel this is end. Okay. This is beautiful. And so we are stuck there. So although an important step, but most people are stuck there. The whole idea, because it is a process, so beyond ego comes the natural self, I call it, or soul, or integrative intelligence, then come universal intelligence, then come non-dual intelligence, and then comes the peak intelligence. Those are stages. So I want to explore fully whatever is there in me as a possibility. And ego, which became egotism, now become an instrument. Okay. It becomes a channel. So Buddha cannot live without ego. Jesus cannot live without ego. Raman Maharshi cannot live without ego. But their ego is not the master. Ego is the servant. So ego will perform its function and then it will retire in its servant quarter, not interfering. Because I don't need ego when I'm looking at the sunset. I want to be with sunset there. So your ego actually is purified in that process. So somebody asked, Buddha had no ego. I said, Buddha has the largest ego you could ever imagine because his ego accommodated this whole experience of nirvana. It became a cosmic ego. And through that, he expressed his teaching for many decades. So this whole idea, I have to cut my ego completely, I have to destroy, that is an impossibility. And a lot of sadhaks, seekers, actually, they are lost because they are struggling, they are fighting their own ego. And they don't understand, I need not to fight. I have to look beyond ego, what is there. If I'm fighting with ego, I'm going to be 100% defeated. So idea is to transcend, integrate, transcend, integrate, transcend, integrate, and you keep on going. And then you have this whole chain, many, many points. And the lowest point is our healthy identity or ego. And the supreme point is that, called as a non-dual, the unlimited, the boundless, the eternal, the pure. The whole spectrum of truth.
So while the ego is important to function in the world, what spiritual masters and mystics have been saying for millennia is that going beyond the ego is what unlocks your full potential. And modern research has come to the same conclusion. So whether we speak to world record-breaking athletes, intellectuals, or artists, there is a consensus. And that is that they perform better or have created their best works when they are in a non-egoic or flow state. Now, my personal experience is that samadhi is no different from a non-egoic, egoless, or flow state. And my yoga practice is what enables me to enter that state. My personal yoga practice is what enables me to enter into that non-egoic flow state. And one of the reasons that I practice daily is because this daily practice has enabled me to learn to enter into this non-egoic state at will. So while I've trained myself using the practice of yoga to enter into the non-egoic state at will, there are many people who enter into the state spontaneously, or who have had spontaneous experiences. So we have Jivasu once again sharing his experience of the non-egoic state, or entering into the non-egoic state spontaneously, possibly not understanding exactly what it was, but also showing how a sequence of experiences has actually helped him use his experience of non-egoic state to achieve stages of higher consciousness, or universal consciousness, as he explains it. Now, for many people, higher consciousness and non-egoic states are very similar. I'm going to hand you over to Jivasu to share his story.
Okay. So my journey actually started around the age of 10 years. During an earthquake, I developed fear of death, dying. For a 10 years old child to develop almost permanent fear of death, it is a catastrophe. In that moment, I became a psychological orphan. Although everything was there around me, but I felt orphan because I knew nobody could protect me from death. In those moments, it became clear.
Mm-hmm.
That gave rise to tremendous anxiety, panic attack, and a lot of mental anguish, about which I became clear around the age of 20 when I was in a medical school finishing my medical degree.
Mm-hmm.
But the real breakthrough came when I met my wife, Karen. It was love at first sight, and it shattered all my patterns for few months. Because the beauty of love is that it can shatter you completely.
That's beautiful.
Because that is the beauty of love. It is so powerful. It is the experience of life energy. That is why we have yoga of love and relationship. And it takes you to your core, gives you a glimpse who you are. But then what happens gradually, it disappears. But in my case, it didn't disappear. So after I met her in that madness, I went to Shivanand Ashram in 1984, I think on the background of that love, the Kundalini experience happened. That is why I always emphasize on human love. That this human love is so important. Don't go to these gurus or philosophy. If you could love with full passion, actually it will activate that life energy for which we are waiting. So in my case, my own wife is a guru, and the only person truly I touch feet with all sincerity is my own wife.
Wonderful.
Because for a man, the best guru, who can be? Only a woman. Feminine. We miss feminine in us because it is hidden. So that was 1984, and after that it continued, and a breakthrough came, very big breakthrough, 1996, after 12 years. And that gave me a very clear, not glimpse, but full experience of integrative intelligence. Some people call it soul. Those were the moments when I experienced, unconditional consciousness, when you become free, and my body became alive. That is why I emphasize so much on the body. And of course, it continued, it expanded, what people call cosmic intelligence, and then intermittently the experience of non-dual, but it came and went, because these experiences, these states, we cannot control. They have their own, absolutely, we can't do anything about it. And then Finally, after this COVID thing, as I was telling now, that that state is there, and it is the state of you can call full passion, and so much inside that all the desires to meet outside people, to socialize, everything disappeared. I call it a state of sannyas, the most beautiful state one can experience. And everything is open, everything is dancing, everything is celebrating.
So for me, being in that non-egoic state is an amazing place for creation, for intellectual understanding, because in that non-egoic state, I feel like a lot of challenges and limitations that I may have set on myself in a very conscious state prevents me from understanding things and concepts. And so in a non-egoic state, I'm more free to understand. For me, what's also very interesting is teaching yoga in a non-egoic state. When I practice with teachers who are in a non-egoic state, I feel different than when I'm in a class led by a self-directed teacher. And I also notice a difference in the classes that I lead. When I lead a class in a state of flow, participants respond differently to when I teach in a very self-directed manner. So you see, when there's a loss of ego, there's greater freedom, greater flexibility, fewer limitations. And one person in an egoless state can help others experience that state too. You see, we mirror each other. So all it takes is for one person in an egoless state to actually change a group of other people. But yoga is not the only way to enter into this non-egoic or flow state. And in upcoming Wellbeing webinars, we will be meeting various practitioners and researchers who use a variety of different belief systems and techniques. So just stay tuned. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be meeting many people who have exciting practices and methods to get into this non-egoic state. However, on our next Wellbeing webinar, we will be exploring gratitude, because adopting an attitude of gratitude is one of the easiest techniques to reduce the dominance of the ego. So thank you for joining me in my wellbeing journey, and I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Now, please do tick the button if you like this. Also leave comments, send feedback and suggestions. I love hearing from you. And if you want to receive updates on all the webinars, then please do subscribe to this channel. So thank you and goodbye.